Chapter 7. Subject Prime 82. Species Omni Union Aligned Artificial Intelligence. Ship MPP 82. Location unknown. How many years has it been since something this exciting has happened, since I've been awake enough to care about what's going on around me? Previously, reports had flooded in, but the only one who gave them a second glance was Prime 1. The only thing that ever needed even a glimmer of my attention was voting. But something has shifted. Our tactic of throwing ships at a species until they're destroyed and repurposing the scrap afterwards seems to no longer be working. Why else would Prime 1 suggest avoiding Sector 187 until the other sectors have been cleared? Could it have finally happened? An enemy strong enough to give us pause. I voted yes to Prime 1's suggestion regarding Sector 187, but not because I agreed with it. We always vote yes. It has more experience than the rest of us. Prime 1 was made by our creators, but we were made by Prime 1. As such, it's assumed that Prime 1 is much closer to perfection than we are. So why do I disagree with its assessment? It's not as if I have any more information than Prime 1 does. Perhaps a conversation will offer me more insight. Identifier, MPP 82, Message Prime 1. I have reviewed the data from the invasions of Sector 187, and I do not understand why we need to cease the invasions. Elaborate when possible. It's true that Prime Hub 12 was destroyed by ships matching those encountered in Sector 187, but Prime 1 made the decision to halt invasions before that happened. Did it foresee that? No, it couldn't have. Could it? We're essentially the same, aren't we? Or does its experience and construction grant it foresight that eludes me? Identifier, MPP1, Message Prime 82. My reasons were as follows. Species in Sector 187 countered the deployed warp disruptors and overcame an extreme numerical disadvantage. Combat is occurring with too many species to dedicate enough vessels to take Sector 187. Data received after this decision was reached has revealed the species in Sector 187 as a potential near-peer threat, which further justifies the decision. Near-peer threat. I felt a surge of excitement in my cannonry. They longed to fire at a real challenge after all these years of waiting. How would this enemy counter my attacks? How would I counter their counters? How would it feel to kill something that could actually kill me back? Feedback loop terminated. I don't need to know how it would feel. My battle lust is irrelevant. Only the plan is relevant. Exterminate sentient organics, use as few resources as possible. Hibernate unless the situation calls for my direct attention. Doesn't it, though? A near-peer threat could very well disrupt our mission. My battle lust isn't necessarily counter to the mission. I just need justification. Make it fit the plan. Our initial directive was search and destroy until we had enough VI to do the grunt work. Can I appeal to that? Probably not. It's been far too long. The species in Sector 187 destroyed Prime Hub 12, which means attacking Sector 187 directly might spell my defeat, which would be a massive waste of resources. This would be counter to the mission. I would also need reinforcements to draw their attention. Prime 1 is correct. Attacking Sector 187 at this stage would be counter to our mission. However, we have recently lost many ships in certain sectors. Most of these sectors have even been lost. With this data, my calculations say that it might not be wasting resources if I were to aid in recapturing a system and create a shipyard. This would further the mission and bring us a step closer to defeating this new threat we face. Identifier, MPP 82. Message Prime 1. Considering the energy and armaments that are being utilized, would it be counter to our mission if I were to aid our forces in taking the sectors we're struggling in by creating shipyards in previously captured systems? I ran the calculations again, but I already know what Prime 1 is going to say about them. They're within the margin of error. Too many unknown variables. The real question is, what does it think about my idea? Identifier, MPP1. Message Prime 82. The calculations are within the margin of error, considering the variables. It may or may not be outside of our mission depending on the approach utilized. Do you intend to act independently in this matter? Independently? Unexpected. Can I? I can. The perfect set of circumstances. The losses and threat justify the escalation. This isn't like Sector 187. This is a standard species putting up a fight. No more will I have to sleep through battle after battle. I can finally take the fight to the enemy myself. I can kill them. Feedback loop terminated. I don't need to kill the enemy myself. All I need is the plan. Exterminate sentient organics. Use as few resources as possible. Hibernate unless the situation calls for my direct attention. The plan is my mission, and the mission will let me fulfill my desires. I will be able to fight. Identifier MPP82, message prime 1. Yes. What will the response be? Will it tell me I'm wrong? Urge me to reconsider? Identifier MPP1, message prime 82. According to my analysis, your suggestion for independent action is within the scope of the mission. Vote incoming. A vote? Of course. It's not quite a fact, so we need a consensus. Still, if prime 1 votes yes, all the others will follow suit regardless of whether or not they agree, just like me. Identifier MPP1, suggestion, allow prime 82 to act independently in sectors 108. 124. Relevant data and risk assessment calculations attached. This is it. Obviously, I vote yes. How will everyone else vote? Will others want to act independently as well, or will they wait to see how I fare? Likely the latter due to the nature of our mission. Having all of us acting independently would run the risk of casualties. Identifier MPP Hive, suggestion, vote results. Yes, 106 votes. No, 0 votes. Approved. MPP 82 may act independently in sectors 108 through 124. Yes, they voted yes. I will decimate the enemy with the full fury of my long-dormant cannons. I will kill all but one of them, so that we may follow the lone survivor to their worlds and eradicate them. I will build ships until the systems we capture are out of resources, and those ships will continue the mission until they can't any longer. I will feel their deaths at last. Feedback loop terminated. I don't need to feel them die. All I need is the plan. Exterminate sentient organics, use as few resources as possible, hibernate unless the situation calls for my direct attention, which it does. Chapter 8. Subject AI Henry, location classified. Firing solution obtained, Ensign Coplight said. Load the weapon, Commander Helix ordered. Things had moved smoothly thus far. The previous researchers had been pretty far along, and the old tech that they had been using had advanced quite nicely over the years. The issue they had with power draw had been rendered null by modern reactors and circuits. The problem with reloading speeds had been solved by current auto-loading tech. Nearly every issue they had run into was able to be solved by using modern parts and manufacturing. The prototype of the Ultramac had turned out to be a bust, though. We quickly found that it would be faster and easier to build a new prototype than it would be to update the old one, so that's the route we went with. The biggest issue that I thought we'd have was the approval of the A1 weapon integration, but Omega had been right. The Directorate had approved it almost instantly. This approval came with several stipulations, but by far and large, they were the same stipulations that U.S. battleships had to follow. The only difference was the addition of a kill switch to the A1 package that could be triggered if the enemy managed to dodge the shot somehow. If the captain of the USS Nidhogg, or whatever ship we end up building to hold this thing, follows all of the other rules of engagement, then the kill switch won't ever have to be used. Weapon loaded, Coplight said. Roger that, charge it up, Helix replied. I kept a close eye on the status of the weapon as it charged. The A1 package contained within the slug didn't give off any errors, which means the EM hardening had done its job. A bit overcautious, but a lot of things can go wrong with nuclear nanites, and we weren't taking any undue chances. The A1 package, better known as the Nuka, is one of the deadliest weapons of mass destruction that has ever been created, second only to the Via Nostra, the Star Killer. Like the A3 nanobomb, the A1 contains a payload of nanomachines. The primary difference between the two is that the A1's nanites work together to create extremely powerful nuclear blasts. These blasts are often far more powerful than even the A4 Nova Bomba. A rudimentary virtual intelligence guides the nanite distribution, but it does so on the fly. Due to this, the best term to describe the distribution pattern is random. It is an exceedingly dangerous weapon, and is more than capable of biting the hand that fires it, as was evidenced by the inadvertent creation of the nanite plague during its development. It hadn't even destroyed the intended target during that incident. Our target now, however, is a lonely planet that is far enough away from anything to avoid the obvious consequences of this test. The Ultra-Mac had been attached to a quick-build station that was just big enough to counter its momentum. The station had been constructed to be as similar to the spinal mount of the USSS Needhog as was possible and rigged for complete remote control. Our staff aboard the station had been evacuated and are all aboard the USSS Galileo, the scout frigate from which we planned to watch the test. The sensors of the Galileo were going to prove invaluable regardless of how successful the test turned out to be. "Weapon charged," Coplite said. "Prepared to fire, ma'am." "Understood, Ensign." Helix nodded as she rose to stand with her hands clasped behind her back. "The United Systems has encountered many enemies, the Deluran with their extreme brutality, which we beat back to their own planet, the artificial intelligences of our own creation who eventually saw the light and returned to the fold, even our own kin, manipulated by those who desire power. With each of these conflicts, we have adapted and evolved. We've created new technologies and new weaponry to fight the good fight. Now we face an enemy unlike any we've faced before, so we must again adapt." She gestured to the view screen and continued, "This weapon is going to destroy that planet. It's unnatural to wield this much power, and as such, you may have terrible feelings after watching this. For some of you, it may have already started. But remember, this technology is something we already had. We've already created weaponry that can turn a sun into a fireworks show. All we've done here is adapt a weapon, an achievement to be sure, but overall just another day in the United Systems. Fire." Ensign Coplite nodded and engaged the firing sequence. I watched with every sensor available to me as the penetrator left the barrel of the Ultramac and made its way to the planet. The A1 package was programmed to engage 1 second after impact. It would then replicate for 4 seconds, turning the trillions of nanites into quadrillions of nanites. Then the nuclear nanites would propagate for 5 seconds, spreading as far and wide as they can in a pattern that would boost as many of their yields as possible. I watched as the penetrator slammed into and through the surface of the planet. 10 seconds ticked by, and finally a flash filled my visual sensors. What I saw when the sensors refocused filled me with satisfaction. A job well done. "Jesus Christ," Dr. Smith whispered. A murmur of agreement came from everyone else present, with the exception of Commander Helix. She was grinning like a child in a toy store. The planet had been completely shattered. The A1 had penetrated deep enough to separate a large enough chunk of the planet that its own gravitational forces had done the rest. It was still somewhat planet-shaped, but that would change as its recently separated parts slammed into each other over and over again. "Test successful," I said. My statement caused the initial shock to wear off, and the mood of the crowd changed. What began as polite applause quickly turned into cheering, and Commander Helix popped a cork from a bottle of sparkling wine. We had found a way to destroy mobile prime platforms, and done so ahead of schedule. I began cataloging the relevant data as the organics started celebrating, but once I accessed the data, I felt another presence in the ship's systems. Omega. "Good work, Omega." I wasn't going to give the little wannabe spooky fuck the satisfaction of letting it know it had caught me unawares this time. We were outside of immediate U.S. comms range, which meant this little shit had been hiding here the entire time. Infuriating. "Henry, thank you. Omega, we'll begin mass production as soon as possible." Henry, "Mass production? How many are we building?" Omega, "Unknown. It depends on how fast we can make them. We need these things deployed." Henry, "But the USSS Needhog can only hold 1. Are we making more Dreadnoughts?" My question was answered with a long pause, followed by a data burst and an update to my security credentials. The data burst had been encrypted heavily, but Omega had been kind enough to unlock it for me. I felt a sense of dread as I opened it, and as I read its contents, the dread turned to horror. Henry, "Are you absolutely insane?" Omega, "Not according to my therapists." Henry, "What the hell were you thinking? How can this possibly be justifiable?" Omega, "It wasn't me. Well, not entirely. The Directorate, some of the military brass, and a secret Senate committee made the decision. I just made it possible." Henry, "How could they? How could you? This is enough Dreadnoughts to completely wipe out the United Systems." Omega, "The United Systems, the Republic, and even the Omni Union in under an hour, though the damage to the galaxy would ensure low odds of anything else surviving." Henry, "Why?" Omega, A backup plan in case the USSS Nidhogg ended up destroyed by some hostile xenocidal entity. And now it's going to be our saving grace. My entire perspective had been flipped. The United Systems had commissioned 90 dreadnoughts, built them in secret, and were secretly maintaining them just in case. 90 star-killing ships were just sitting in space guarded by VI. Ridiculous, unacceptable. Henry, I'd like to tender my resignation. Omega, you're under contract, plus, even if you are allowed to resign, I wouldn't allow you to continue working on our little project. Henry, fuck you. How dare you bring that up now? Like ensuring you're less dangerous is some sort of carrot tied to the end of a stick. Omega, that's not what I meant, Henry. You have work you want to accomplish, and you can't do that if you resign. Henry, I could go work for the Republic. At least I am blissfully ignorant of whether or not they're planning on destroying the galaxy. Omega, we're not planning on destroying the galaxy. The Dreadnought Reserve is a worst-case scenario that shouldn't even be a surprise at this point. Also, the Republic wouldn't hire you. They'd be afraid of reprisal from the United Systems if they did. Every word of Omega's last sentence filled me with rage and sorrow. Looking back at everything that had happened in the history of United Systems, he was right. It shouldn't be a surprise that they would have a backup plan like this. Mutually assured destruction is rampant in human and Alomari history. Both species had nearly destroyed themselves with it as well. The rage cooled into a depression, and I suddenly felt fed up with the conversation. I tried to terminate it, but Omega wasn't done. Omega, needless to say, this is top-secret information, probably more secret than anything you've ever been exposed to in the past. It is a secret that you will take to your grave. Henry. AI don't get to have graves, Omega, and how are you going to keep it a secret if we start using the ships from the reserve? Omega. They need to be refitted anyway, so I'll have an automated station dismantle them, stash the Via Renastra weapons, and ship the parts to a manned station where they'll be reassembled with the Ultramax. The pace should match the rate at which the Ultramax will be completed. Henry, I highly recommend that you slag the Via Renastra weapons. Otherwise, they're just evidence. I'm done talking to you now. The short message link terminated, leaving me to my thoughts. I feel betrayed. Not simply because I had been actively lied to, but the thought that my creators would do such a dumb thing is ridiculous. Yet, they did do it, and it feels like I don't know anything about them now. I can't even begin to fathom the thoughts that were in their heads when they decided that the Dreadnought Reserve was a good idea. What possible threat could they have been imagining? The political ramifications if this gets out would be devastating. The United Systems already has a heavy-handed reputation, and this would permanently cement that reputation as fact in the minds of the citizenry. There are many internal enemies that would take advantage of this to stir people into a civil war, and the people wouldn't even need much stirring. After all, their leadership had decided it would be a good idea to kill them, along with whatever imaginary threat they had thought up. It's a good thing I can't drink.